Hello everybody, welcome back. It's me again, Liz Mosley. I'm editor and partner here at Tortoise Media, and we are going to be tackling now, in the context of our Responsible Business Summit, this of whether Black Lives do. And we're joined by a number of guests. Simon Woolley will be joining us partway through the thinking, but I'd like to kick off quickly with our first guest, whose name is Katie Dash. She's head of Everyone's Business Campaign and co-chair of the BAME network at the CBI. And we saw some slides there. Morning, Katie. Afternoon, just afternoon. We saw some slides there in the run-up to this this session that had just a snapshot of a sort of sense of a picture of how, in particular, big businesses are doing and are engaging with this notion of racial justice. We saw donations to sort of racial justice charities from a variety of big companies, and the size of those donations relative to donations to other causes. We saw numbers of companies in the FTSE 100 who choose to publish pay gap data, representation data, and so on. So there seems to be certainly more available information about what companies are doing. And I guess if I had £1 for every time I'd heard someone say, or read a corporate statement or an article that says corporations need to make more than just commitments, we need to see meaningful change, I'd be a very rich woman. But I guess what I'd be interested to know from you in the context of your role at the CBI is what you would say meaningful change looks like really. How does it manifest? And to what extent do we feel comfortable with the types of measures and metrics that are tending to be used to indicate that process?
Sure. So first thing, in terms of meaningful change, it really starts with having a conversation internally. And I think some of the good examples of businesses who have taken action on this agenda have really started with that, holding up the mirror internally and looking at the issue across the board. And it's really kind of assessing businesses, whether they determine it as either a PR issue or a business issue. So the businesses that have had that kind of business issue conversation are the ones that I think are on the journey to meaningful change. And when I say talk about treating it as a business issues, is looking at things across the board. So how do your employees feel about it? And in particular, your Black employees, checking in with them, understanding their lived experience, both on a personal level, if they're open to discussing that, but also on a professional level in the business. Then there are broader conversations around things like how you hire, how you recruit, how you progress people in the organization, and your processes as well, your interactions with the supply chain, how are you using your platform and your voice as well to make a difference. So there's so many intersecting parts into that discussion. When it comes to data in particular, I think the first question for businesses, are you collecting that data in the first place? I think it's really, really important. There's that famous phrase, what gets measured gets done or gets changed. And I think that's really, really important when we're talking about meaningful change. You really need to understand the state of play for your business. Then there's something around, okay, where do you want to go based on that data? So this is where the conversation around targets and whether they are helpful or not comes in. I personally think targets are important to create some sense of direction. So having the data of where you are and the data of where you want to go is particularly important. But then also kind of what metrics are you using in order to measure progress as well? There are some things that perhaps are quite hard to measure. When you talk about people feeling if there is a difference within the organisation or how they are perceived by other stakeholders, consumers, for instance, so that's very subjective. So a lot of that will come to what measures are you using to measure something that's quite subjective. It's not impossible, but it really takes some thought to ensure that you're measuring something meaningfully.
Katie, I edited a thinking just about an hour ago where we were talking about whether Build Back Better is anything but a nice piece of marketing, sloganeering with a number of people. And one of the suggestions in the chat was that CSR should just be canned altogether, because if you sort of create an annex in your organization of people who need to be worried about the sort of social impact of your operations, then everybody else is let off the hook. I wonder if you think that diversity and inclusion, which can sometimes be treated in a similar way as how CSR has been treated in the past in some organizations, will end up with a similar fate. How do we know that diversity and inclusion is genuinely helping, and how do we know when it's a sort of symbolic gesture to help an organization feel that it's doing meaningful work when really it isn't?
Yes, I think taking the lessons of how CSR has previously been treated, it is that kind of compartmentalizing it and having it in a different department. I would say it's all integrating D&I across the business, and that includes from the top. So who on your board or your executive committee is accountable for diversity and inclusion in the business? What's happening at your ExCo -1 level as well? Where's the accountability there? Is it in things like people's objectives? For example, at the CBI, every single individual who works at the CBI has a diversity and inclusion objective. How are you talking about it with your customers as well? Are you including it in terms of other things like your marketing, for instance, that diversity there? So it's really ensuring that it's integrated throughout the business. So it comes back to the point I made earlier about ensuring it's treated as a business issue and not just an issue over here. And so a lot of that comes down to accountability as well. So ensuring that there's accountability at all different levels at the business to meet that goal.
Yeah, I wonder if we might touch on some of the specifics of what a good quality internal and external audit, perhaps more with the focus on the external audit, might incorporate. I sense that there's relatively good understanding about how I might audit my internal operations to do with inclusive culture and representation and those sorts of things. I'm not saying that there's a good understanding of what to do about it, but there's a good understanding of what it might involve, the sort of understanding and measurement part of it. What sorts of things would a good quality external audit of racial justice in regards to your business operations look like?
Yeah, so I think that's definitely need to understand how your customers or your stakeholders more broadly feel about this agenda. So your customers, your investors, your supply chain, perhaps those local community stakeholders in the areas you operate in, what their assessments are of this agenda, because it's important that you do understand it for the health of your business. Then you also have to understand the wider kind of social and political context, if anything, just for your own information to understand that. I think more broadly, there's another angle around ensuring that you understand how business interplays with different parts of this agenda. So, your products and services, are they inclusive or directed at different communities in a fair way? If you operate in certain areas where there is kind of a large ethnic minority population, are you being representative of that in your products or services? Are you supporting businesses of all kind of backgrounds, in terms of who owns them, to prosper in society? I think just to take one example or something a bit different, like a professional service firm, let's take a law firm. Are there things that you could be doing differently in terms of who you engage with, who you offer services to, what kind of support you provide in your local community to ensure that you are supporting Black lives and Black businesses and Black communities, and not just Black communities, other minority communities to that agenda as well.
So you would find in your external audit, your results, if you like, your kind of school report that you would get when you've done your external audit, you would find things that you were doing that were actively damaging that you needed to stop, and you would look for things that you could be doing more of to support and to help. I suppose I'm going to come to Ashish now, Ashish Prashar, who's Senior Director of Global Comms at Publicis Sapient, to sort of pick up the baton from where Katie sort of left us with this potentially fairly hair-raising external audit that I've done in my sort of theoretical company. Ash, you're currently a sort of comms person in the corporate world, but you've got a long career in political and advocating for social justice. We had a very bracing chat before today, and I'd love to hear from you about most companies, or a lot of companies, will be receiving we'll find that it's not a happy report that they get. If they were to do a proper external audit, they will find bad news in that external audit. What are some of the things that you find frustrating, maybe, about how a company might react to that bad news?
I mean, that's a really interesting question. I mean, and thank you for having me, by the way. It's really early here in the US. But look, I think it's good. They have to live and breathe it, right? So it's not just about those audits that, and I completely support everything what Katie's saying. It's about how they act as a business in their community, right? It's, you know, think of the biggest topic right now here in the United States. It's the criminal justice system. And that's what BLM, how it kicked off. I mean, everyone talks about how this is a new revolution. BLM's been around for 7 years. Right? It started when, you know, Trayvon Martin was killed in Florida. So, you know, it's a movement that's been, you know, just been galvanized. And the difference is this time, I want to say, and this is why businesses are being impacted by this, is there are no distractions at the moment. You know, we're all at home because of COVID. Everyone can see the ills and injustices that Black citizens have to face in their community, whether both here in the United States or in the United Kingdom. Businesses don't have the, you know, the protection of everyone coming to work and just being distracted. So, you know, rather than contribute to this dehumanizing environment that we have for Black citizens and Black people in both America and the UK, you know, we as a combination, like whether businesses, people, or stakeholders or shareholders, must apply pressure to protect our Black neighbors. You know, historically, businesses have not been interested in taking a permanent stand or effective stand against either our criminal justice system, our police, because they're, you know, loath the, you know, to let profits slip, or worrying about alienating some customers. But, you know, as protests continue, as you and me talked about across, you know, at least the United States, I know it's not been as big in the United Kingdom, but they're still going on in New York every day. You know, they're still going on in Portland. They're still going on. And they're not violent like everyone else says. They're actually peaceful protests, and they are raising awareness. And, you know, Americans aren't just determined to call out local police departments, prisons, governments. They're determined to call out companies. This is not going away, all business leaders watching. You know, so it's now time for people to stop weighing economic risk or passing profit margins. And it's time for businesses across America and across the world to act. We have to look back. We will look back at our actions in this moment and see how serious we were about protecting our Black neighbors, you know, protecting our Black employees, our stakeholders, our shareholders, our, you know, citizens, and quickly discover what side of history businesses were on. And without change, any claims of solidarity with communities of color that you posted with that Black square are for naught, you know. And it's time to show that, you know, Black lives really matter, not just in your employment, but how your customers and how you feel about your community. And you need to put, you know, people before profits and freedom over fear right now, because this is not stopping. I think there's a part of business that wants this to go away and employees come back to the office, and distractions. There are no distractions. I think Malcolm X said it best, you know, when he says, this is something he said in the 60s in response to Jackie Robinson being made a professional baseball player. He said, you know, sports is the distraction to Black liberation. There are no sports. There are no live events. There are no things to keep us distracted. Everyone is focused on real systemic change, and businesses have their role and have to step up in this once in a generation opportunity here.
Ash, it's fascinating, and it's an important and useful reminder for us sitting here in the UK to remember that the context feels different if you're in the States. From here just at the moment and today. I'm interested in, because you sort of have a number of hats, off the record, in the last sort of 12 months, it was actually before the pandemic started, off the record, corporate communications people have said to me that they feel they're running out of road in the companies that they work in, and buying time on matters of equality. That their sort of warm words are running cold, and to the extent, in some cases, that they're leaving the industry, which, you know, is sort of, wasn't great to hear, because you sort of sense there's an inauthenticity and a sort of, as you say, black square on Instagram and that's me done kind of vibe. If you're in that position as a corporate communications person specifically, what do you do? How can you internally hold your bosses to account to do better than we're doing a black square and a commitment and that's kind of it? Or you know, we've done our diversity and inclusion unconscious bias training, and you know, aren't we good? Stick that in the annual report. If you have a sense that this is inauthentic or sort of surface level stuff, what can you do as, in your context, as a comms person? What do you ask for?
You've got to tell your bosses. People are going to see who you work with. People are going to see who you do business with. People are going to see where you make your money, and they're going to look at your leadership and see how many black people you have in it. I hate the term BAME in the UK because it's a really easy way for businesses in the United Kingdom to say, we have lots of BAME employees. I'm brown, I'm not black. I consider myself an ally, but I'm not black. You know, we do not, including my own business, we do not have enough black leadership. You know, and it's nothing short of shocking how we use these grouped terms to ostracize the black community. Look, to answer your question specifically, if we're not living and breathing it, I think businesses are failing. We cannot do work for the police in this environment, and people will find out who did the advertising gig for the police, you know, whether it's the Met or the NYPD. You can't work for Homeland Security. You know, people are going to know you did work for ICE. Now, I'm speaking of McKinsey's and Accenture's and other businesses in the world who like built technology to oppress communities of color. It's being all published. This is all your dirty work, that all the money you've made of suppressing and oppressing a community is coming out. And if leaders, if communications professionals like myself and other comms people are not telling their leaders, it's all going to be out there for the public to see your evils. They are not doing their job right now. They're not even protecting their company if they're not telling their bosses that. So that's what your role is as a comms director right now, because your dirty laundry is going to be aired. Every contract, every business deal, every profit you've made off this is coming out. And I think you and me talked about this. 4,100 companies in the United States are making money off the prison industrial complex, which today is the enslavement of black people in modern times. The 13th Amendment, when passed and ending slavery, allowed us to enslave black people today through the prison industrial complex. And everyone talks about, oh, private prisons are being abolished. Private prisons are only $8 billion of that. The food contract for the current public prison system here in America is worth more than that. It's worth something between 8 to 10 billion. Businesses are making money off enslaving people, because those people in those prisons aren't just being locked up, and mass incarceration, we can talk about that in a whole other panel, but like aren't just being locked up, but they're being used for labor too by the state. So we are making profits of their labor. And if anything wants to hark back to slavery, in Texas, they're not even paid for cotton picking. And a business is making money off that today. And to me, if we all believe that slavery is supposed to be abolished and all that, your dirty laundry is coming out. And this is an opportunity for you to divest from systems of oppression and put these things right now. Because it's not just employing people, it's about what your values are at your core.
Yeah. Thank you, Ash. It's a very different feeling of what action looks like than, you know, let's publish some data about representation. I'm not in any way diminishing how important representation is, but the picture you paint about really looking at the actions of your business is rather different than that sort of thing. I might try and come, if I can, to my colleague Zav Greenwood, who's been making some comments in the chat that has received some vigorous nodding and furious agreement from some people. If Zav is there, because I can't help but feel that the atmosphere, hiya Zav, the atmosphere when it comes to this conversation about our sort of collective sense of how well it's going, if you like, feels rather different than our collective sense of how it's going on, for example, sustainability and waste and some of the other things that we were talking about earlier in the day.
Yeah, I mean, you can never read too much into anecdotes, but I've probably talked to 15 to 20 friends about what their company or organization has done in terms of racial justice. And nearly every time they say that publicly they've committed to it in some way, but in reality have done nothing. And that includes, an organization like Stonewall, which on many issues internally is very, very, very good. But then on the case of race, it just completely falls down. And I slightly facetiously said that every FTSE 100 executive should be interviewed by this woman called Z-Way, who has done these amazing Instagram story interviews of normally people, public figures who've been kind of cancelled in some way or have committed to racial justice. And if she interviewed any FTSE 100 executive for 10 minutes, I genuinely think that person would fall apart. I mean, you can say all you want in terms of the metrics and in terms of the data, but I do worry that when we see things like Black Lives Matter this year, obviously the black squares, even the donations, once the news has forgotten about it, I don't think companies will change.
Thanks.
I don't think it's in their immediate interest to change.
Thanks, Zav. I'm going to come now maybe to respond to what Zav was saying to Simon Woolley. Hi, Simon. Thanks so much for being here. Excuse me. Simon, you'll know, is the founder of Operation Black Vote. Simon, do you have a sense of whether businesses, leaders of big businesses, in the way that Zav talks about them, get it? Let's start there.
Sure. Well, I mean, look, it's been an extraordinary several months that has unfolded before us. First, we've had the COVID-19 and the devastating impact on Black, Asian, and minority ethnic communities. Every day in the beginning, we saw those Black and brown faces, the nurses, the care workers that were disproportionately dying. And we knew then that this disease is not racist, but it did expose the racialized, the systemic racism within our society. And then on top of that, we had the brutal death of George Floyd, which has convulsed nations to confront again the structural inequalities. And business felt that they needed to respond. Now, whether or not that will be superficial, only time will tell. I think some have engaged. I've had conversations with CEOs, and they have said to me, Liz, if Black lives matters, really matters, what do I need to do? And I would say to all those leaders, whether you're the chair, the CEO, or in the board, that leadership is crucial. If you want to make a difference, you can. You really can. You've got to lead from the top. You've got to tell those that are making decisions, stop engaging in what I describe as political aikido that lock people out and lock others in. And the ones that get locked out, I've seen it. I've been on panels in which we've had 4 white people and me, and they've said, and there's been 3 people shortlisted right to the end, 2 Black and 1 white. They've said, this Black person doesn't quite have the expertise. They said, the other Black person has too much expertise and would look like an official, but the white person's perfect. And I was there. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this must happen all the time. The way that they've done this song and dance to make it, to replicate themselves. Here's the point about this: getting this right, confronting our baggage, confronting those uncomfortable truths. The goal, Liz, is to unlock talent. unlock that deluge of creativity. And so when I think your last speaker said, Xavier said, it's not in the company's interest, it really is. It really is in that interest to unlock the talent on their doorstep, to have those pipelines. You know, people say to me, and I'll finish on this list, say to me, you know, how can you prove that people are locked in and other people are locked out? So I said, look no further than this data. 7 public schools in 2018, 7 accounted for more than 50% of Oxbridge intakes, Oxford and Cambridge, 7, as opposed to 2,400 state schools. Think about that for a second. Who is locked in? Who is locked out? Until we recognize these barriers, our companies cannot take the talent to become the creative director, the CEOs on the boards. But we can do it, we must do it.
Thanks, Simon. I will come back to you in a sec. I would like to just hear a couple of people from the room, if I can, who are watching. Trisha, we've just brought you in. I think we should be able to see and hear you. Are you there? Hi, Trisha.
Hi, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you well.
Thank you, first of all, for a great summit. I've really enjoyed it. I usually kind of come in and out, but I've been on every session just listening to everybody. I think it really, and also your intimacy is very, very good here. I just wanted to mention one thing, because I do, you know, we did with a company that is very, very 50-50 on gender, was lacking in ethnic diversity, and it didn't even realize it was. It's a research institute. And so I wanted to just, show up the idea that using Zoom can be a very empowering thing to bring people together. I mean, we're all talking about the fact that we're missing our physical contacts with each other, etc. But it was a moment where we brought 200 people on board who were going to speak about their particular, the particular discrimination that they felt, because there were a lot of them who were, you know, ethnically mixed. And when they actually, it was such a brave thing for them to do. It was very emotional. There were a lot of tears. I get quite teary now, actually, when I think about it, because the bravery of people who have had to build a shell around themselves to just deal with the everyday discrimination that they have. And, you know, this is a research institute, so there are people who are heads of departments, whether it's the Europe program or the Africa program or the Middle East. And some of these were working in the Europe program, and they were Black. And, you know, they had to talk about the fact that when they were at an event or when they were about to do a panel, they were asked where, you know, the wine was after, you know, after the conversation. And the idea that someone who was Black couldn't be head of a Europe program was just inconceivable to people. But having it said out loud to a Zoom room of 200 people, I think it's the first time that senior managers and senior people literally they couldn't have that kind of conversation physically. They couldn't have 200 people around the table. And so I just would like to say that I think Zoom really does have huge benefits. It creates almost a safe space for these people to express themselves in ways that they hadn't before. So that was just what I wanted to say. And thank you, because I'm really enjoying this. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Trisha. I'm pleased you're enjoying it. I'd like to go next, if I can, to Mariana. Are you there, Mariana?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. What's your comment? You made some interesting comments in the chat about political parties in particular, and a sort of disconnect between parties that champion racial justice and actually the accessibility of those. Operation Black Vote obviously is about democratic engagement and representation.
Yes, I feel that a lot of parties of all colour have with the Black Lives Matter campaign have made great sort of noises and of supportive noises. However, the more you sort of have actual lived experience with parties, the more you realize that actually the experience doesn't really chime with voices that are, supportive voices. So parties really have to get real, because they're institutionally racist as other structures. So when it comes to real sort of meaningful diversity and inclusion, you find that your voice is valued just in a confined space. So if you are talking on Black issues, then you know that you're called for and your opinions are listened to. However, if you're talking about wider issues, economic issues, issues that affects the whole nation, then your voice isn't valued. And that happens with representation as well. So parties that I'm affiliated with have a problem of actually allowing someone from a sort of London background to have a meaningful engagement with say MPs in say northern parts of the country that are deemed to be more white, and that in itself is actually making you feel like you have a sort of a ghetto voice rather than a national voice.
Yeah, thanks ever so much, Mariana, representing from Lambeth. I might just go to Katie to Simon to respond to that, because I'm wondering, Simon, if you have a sense of, obviously with a foot in both the political and the slightly, we're talking here about the business camps, do you have a sense that the role of business leaders in particular, which is what we're trying to talk about today, has changed over the course of this year? Let's take the UK as an example, in regards to their responsibility to campaign for social justice, as opposed to leaving it all to the politicians.
Yes, I do think there has been a moment. I probably think that with the death of George Floyd, and also as well when people witnessed the Black Lives Matter protesters, and then some of the police video nasties, the Olympic couple, Nicole Williams, for example, when we saw her and her partner being dragged out of the car, a whisker away from violence with their 3-month-old child in the back. I think a lot of white people felt this couldn't happen to us. And I think in that moment, they said, something's profoundly wrong. But we're not there yet by a long stretch. I mean, I've looked in your chat and somebody said that I fear this whole language around structural racism is inappropriate and is causing division. And so here we are laying bare uncomfortable truths. And people are saying, by laying that bare, we're causing division. And I think that this is, part of the challenge, that when the Prime Minister asked me to set up the race disparity unit, she said that we've got to lay bare uncomfortable truths. And with that, we have to have the mantra of explain these racial inequalities or change. Our society, Liz, needs to be big enough, bold enough, and brave enough to look at these disparities, I think they're inequalities, and to say, as a matter of urgency, we must change it. Changing it, not because it's some political correctness or woke thing, because we need to. It's everybody's interest. And so for the person that made those comments, when we are talking about these delicate and not nice things to confront, we're doing it for the well-being of our society. And actually, we'll be better, we'll be stronger together when we deal with it, because people won't be locked out, talent will flow, we get on with each other, we understand each other. But if we put our heads in the sand and deny it, I fear for us all. We'll have what you see in America, in the United States of America, where we've had a president who gives a nod and a wink to right-wing ultra-fascists, stand by, stand ready, is about the most atrocious thing I've heard from any president of the United States in my lifetime. We must not go down that path. And we will not go down it if we confront our realities and wonderfully, beautifully deal with it.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. I'm going to go now, if I can, to Sky Bibi, if you're there, and if we can see you, Sky, and hear you. And just because you made a remark that you've represented lots of race discrimination cases in relation to business, it must be your role, and I'm interested to hear your experiences in that regard, and if you feel that things are changing. Are you there, Sky? I think I can see that you're, quite see your face. Hopefully we'll be able to come back to Sky, but I did want to go to Katie, and I think Ash would be brilliant to talk to this point as well. On the previous session, Monica Sutton was on, and in her sort of opening remarks, we weren't talking specifically about racial justice, but she sort of referenced the flurry of calls that she took just after the murder of George Floyd from sort of panicked company representatives. And the question that they were asking her was, is this okay to say? It was a sort of framing of some of the queries that she had. And I wonder if Ash, being a comms person, and Katie, in your role sort of advising companies from the CBI, the is it okay to say thing, the sort of sense of nervousness and not wanting to put your foot in it. Do you feel that there is a better now, here in middle of October, slap bang in the middle of Black History Month and everything else, sort of 7 months down the line, do you feel like that initial nervousness has eased a bit and people are feeling more confident to just come out and, you know, call it by its name, racism or discrimination or whatever?
So yes and no. I think that the companies that, or the individuals who are comfortable doing so are the ones who have really taken the time to reflect, to educate themselves, to really understand language and terminologies, people's lived experience, and therefore kind of have reached the get it phase, although there's a long way to go. There's lots of complexities with that. For those that are still asking the question, I mean, it's natural to be uncomfortable. These are very uncomfortable conversations. We're talking about systemic issues here, which are complex and take time to understand. So for those that are not at that phase, it might just be that they're still learning, and that's completely fine. And then there might be those who are kind of maybe avoiding the issue or who are hesitant to address. And I think that's very much the target audience we need to look at. So what is stopping those individuals really engaging in those sorts of conversations? So I think it's quite split. Yeah. But I think you can tell by the effort the individual has undertaken in order to engage with the agenda.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. What do you think, Ash? Do you think that maybe in comparison to the US, perhaps might be interesting, is that sort of, is it okay to say thing, maybe well-intentioned, maybe an excuse, maybe both of those things at the same time? Do you think that's eased a bit, given all of the work and all that has been said this year?
You have to say something. It's not about whether it's okay. If you're not saying something, you're on the wrong side of history. Yeah. If you're not admitting you're uncomfortable, you're on the wrong side of history. If you're not willing to make changes, you're on the wrong side of history. I just want to address one thing that Simon quickly said. You mentioned Trump being horrible. I worked in politics on both sides of the pond recently for Vice President Biden. Like, he's a horrible human being and a Nazi, frankly. But the British government is not much better. Let's not forget that Boris Johnson called Barack Obama a Kenyan when he didn't believe in Brexit. Let's not forget that, just because he has Priti Patel in there, we have a term out here, not all skin folk are kinfolk, okay, right? Like, she's a racist. She would oppress her own parents because she's putting in policies that are impacting Black and brown people in a way that I've never seen before. So yes, businesses have to stand up to that, because that's your customer, that's your employee, that's everything. And if you're uncomfortable, that's okay. Get comfortable, like, figure it out. It's your job to learn this right now. It's not excusable. You know, I think Britain and France and European nations think of themselves as less racist. Mm-hmm. You've never really dealt with all the horrors of colonization. Like, let's not forget that you invented slavery, not America. America might have carried it on, but you invented it. Most British businesses of that generation, and still some of them exist today, are built off the back of enslaved people across the world. Mm-hmm. And you owe reparations, apologies, and a lot more. And like Lloyd's recently, they apologized at the beginning of the, right after George Floyd. But, you know, a lot of other businesses have a lot more to admit to right now, right? And we mentioned using slave labor of prisons. But the reality is that, you know, we say Black people are the culture here. Like, think about all the brands that have made money off the back of Black culture, whether it be fashion, whether it be Nike, whether it be all this stuff. Do they pay their Black staff? Or do they even have Black staff in the first place? But they take Black culture and sell it. So your company already does that. You have a lot to own up to. You know, leaders have no excuse right now not feeling comfortable. And there's another thing. You asked what your colleague Katie mentioned earlier, what Black businesses could do, what businesses could do. You know, employing people, representation, all that's important. How about leaders? Take a look at every Black person that wasn't given a promotion by a white boss. Every Black person who didn't get the pay rise, every Black person who had to leave because of the uncomfortable environment that you built for them. Now look at the white manager. Do you want that person in your company? Do you want that person in your company? Because that's what I'm asking today. Because the reality is that, you know, the Black experience to me is maddening. It's contradictory. On the one hand, we celebrate Black people, like in Black History Month right now, Dr. King, LeBron James. I'm speaking of Americans right now because I'm here, but Rosa Parks and Beyonce. At the same time, the vast majority of Black people are disproportionately incarcerated, over policed, supervised, pushed out of employment, pushed out of our schools and into our prison system. It's a maddening experience. And society says, oh, it doesn't exist. It's on you. Pull yourself up. All this has to do with other systems. We engage with Black men and women on things like justice and policing. We don't engage with them on like how they felt through the education experience, in the workplace, through economic opportunity. In America, Black women are the largest educated segment of our society, and they earn less. Why is that? See, racism is every aspect of our society, and yes, it's uncomfortable. And, you know, we always look at how Black people are treated by the police and the courts, and George Floyd and all these deaths, Breonna Taylor, we don't say her name enough, have highlighted this. But we focus just on that. That gives everyone else, it gives them an opportunity to not admit they're accountable too. They're not directly engaged in the criminal justice system, so it's got nothing to do with me. We need to look at our racist society and look at the people with privilege and how they've used that privilege to look down at others. And we need to think about holistically how Black people have been failed, and we need to look holistically at the capitalist and racist structures that we've built to do that.
Thank you, Ash. And I'm conscious we've got 3 minutes to go, and I really want to make sure I can take a few more comments from the room and to try and filter some of this stuff down to sort of actions that people can really recognise. I think we have Sky now there and able to talk. I'd love to hear from Sky if I can.
Hi, hello.
Hello, hi Sky. Sorry, we
hello.
Get you earlier on.
Yes, so from my perspective is, from what I've heard, Simon, Ash, you 100%, and companies need to actually not just pay lip service to these policies that they get embroiled in terms of frameworks and legalities. A lot of them, what I've experienced is they just do it as a tick box exercise. And now with Black Lives Matter, they're really taking note, really worried and really concerned. And a lot of them now want to update policies and procedures relating to this. So I think with Black Lives Matter, I think it's an excellent movement. And I think that companies and businesses have to really take note and take it up as part of their corporate social responsibility.
Mm. Thanks. Thank you very much, Sky. Is Nemo able to speak? Nemo's actually a colleague of mine at Tortoise. If she's there, I'd love to hear from her, because she expresses sort of some slight, hi Nemo, you're there.
Hi,
Hiya. You were talking about a sort of a slight skepticism I sensed in your remark about the sort of training and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So I don't have the answers. Like, I need to say that first of all, I don't know enough. But like, I guess my main skepticism or whatever is just kind of coming from the fact that like a lot of these discussions, they kind of come and go cyclically. They talk about diversity and inclusion and representation and subconscious, unconscious, whatever conscious bias training, like all this training sessions that go on in like corporate spaces and, you know, wherever it happens. And we've been having these discussions, I think, for a long time now, and very little has changed. And I don't really see how, just because this is at the other end of a summer of like, you know, like basically racial justice protests and like you know, a bit of a reckoning that's come particularly in America, that these things are going to all of a sudden work their magic and change these environments. And I think that there also just needs to be like a more leveling question about what racial justice actually is. Like, what do we think it is in these spaces? Is it representation? Is it more seats at the table at these big FTSE 100 companies, like without actually asking what are they doing? Are they ethical? Are they in their foundation a place that is compatible with racial justice, depending on what your idea of it really is? And you know, I think that we need to then ask a question about racism and capitalism, because we can't kind of look at these two things as separate from one another. And I think that in that sense, it is then, I don't know, I think that I'm not sure, but I'm just wondering like how we can have a more fruitful conversation that kind of transcends the same discussions that we've been having for 20 to 30 years now about, you know, Black excellence. And that's important, especially within the short-term context. But I don't know, I think I would like to imagine a more hopeful and more equitable future for us, and 3 Black people at the top and the rest of us still kind of, you know, living in incredibly dire situations.
Hard to disagree with that, Nemo. Thank you very much. I'm going to go to take one more comment, if I can, from Ben Cumming, who I know has been commenting gamely in the chat and represents the Responsible Business Initiative. Ben, are you there?
Hang on one sec. Can you see me?
I can't. Yes, I can.
Hi guys. Sorry about the background. I wasn't expecting to be on today.
No, I just wondered if you might be able to say, in the context of what you do at the Responsible Business Initiative, the danger with conversations like this is that it becomes overwhelmingly difficult. And I would love to be able to, I'm going to go back to our invited speakers in a sec to sort of get one big ask for what we should be pushing for. Let's give ourselves the next 12 months. What are some of the ways that the work you do at the RBI, do you try to encourage organisations to do better, specifically in relation to racial justice?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it starts with the recognition that issues of our criminal justice systems, both in the US and the UK, are intractable from issues of racial equality, but also that it's not enough for companies to only do no harm. I mean, Ash was talking a lot about the need for companies to divest themselves from slave-like systems of incarceration and penal labor, and also some of the predatory systems within those. But we ask that it's not enough for companies to do that. They actually have to use their voice, their platform, and their influence to advocate for a fairer and more just and equitable system. And yeah, to your point, I'd be keen to hear from all of the panelists on, you know, what are 1 or 2 of the ways, or the most important ways that they feel companies can actually advocate for change and equality within our justice system.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks ever so much, Ben. Let's do that then. We're 3 minutes over already, but we have got a lunch break, so I'm going to be bold and take another 3 minutes just to give this session an opportunity to sort of round off in a good way. Perhaps let's start with Simon, if I can. Simon, what is the one thing that we collectively, perhaps we tortoise, you know, we're a journalistic organisation, we ought to be able to carve out some power in this conversation if we do our jobs properly. What should we be looking at or asking for?
Yes, well, what you shouldn't be doing is asking people like me and tackle structural systemic race inequality in a soundbite or an hour. If you, media and business, are serious about this, then let's put some serious time. Let's put some serious energy. And I will promise you this, you, your company, our society will be the beneficiaries of this. I am tired of having Black Lives Matter meetings and having to come up with a killer soundbite to tackle centuries of structural inequality. But I want to, and I want companies to effectively, equitably engage.
Absolutely fair, and I take on the chin your feedback, Simon. Thank you very much. Katie, have you got a sort of a thought to leave us with today before we go and take a break?
Yeah, I mean, I completely echo what Simon said around, you know, can't really summarize it all in a soundbite or in an hour. I think the main thing I would say, particularly to the CEOs or the C-suite listening on the call, is to treat it as a business issue. Don't compartmentalize it into any kind of PR issue or D&I hub. I just like to echo, you know, the world is watching and the world is skeptic, and you know, dirty laundry is being exposed. I would probably go further to say the whole laundrette is being kind of turned over. So I think it's very, very important that you're treating it in the whole as a business issue and not in a PR sense.
Good, thank you very much, Katie. That's clear. Ash, I know you're over there in the States. What's a sort of parting thought from you today?
I go back to apartheid South Africa, right? The movement that students and young people and people of all colors at the time put pressure on the South African government. Businesses played a vital role in doing that. Coca-Cola, lots of other businesses pulled out. We need to do that again now. Mm-hmm. Any business across America or the world should not be working for me, because Simon and Katie have addressed the internal stuff.
Yeah.
But if you make money off the criminal justice system in any country, off the police, off Homeland Security, of anything, then you are complicit. You have to divest now from white supremacy. Like, you have to divest. I'm talking about even the Silicon Valley giants, the Googles, the Apples, and everything else. You make technology for the police and the border services. Stop doing that now, because the world is watching. And people are not going back to their offices. There are no distractions, like I said earlier on. The one thing I want all businesses to do right now is to sanction our law enforcement, sanction our criminal justice system, and give them no resources to oppress a whole race of people in Western Europe and America.
Thank you very much. Of course, to Ashish for joining us from the States, and to Katie and to Simon for their time, and to everybody who has contributed today. This is a part of a much, much bigger conversation in the world and inside of Tortoise, and everything that we're doing around responsible business, and indeed around closing the power gap. So I'm very, very grateful to everybody for their contributions. It would feel to me that we're far, far, far from feeling comfortable in any sense on this question. But I do hope that we can at least take some time at lunchtime to have a proper think about what we have heard. Please do go and put the kettle on, have a sandwich, and we will reconvene at 2 o'clock for the continuation of the Responsible Business Summit. You can jump off and come back on the same Zoom link, or you can stay on, and I think we'll be playing tunes and what have you. So thank you so much to everybody who's contributed and stuck around for the day, and we'll see you shortly. Thank you.